Take me to the sea, wash away my worries, let my soul be free. Take me to the ocean, take me to the sea, wash away my worries, let my soul be free.
Hello world, I'm Mhax. Back in IRL, I go by Curtis. Welcome to another episode of the State Copy Podcast. As always, I'll remind you to review episode 0 and its appended segments for terms, conditions, and disclosures applicable to the entirety of this content. Thank you. Well, hey everybody, good morning. It's Saturday, about 10 local on April 8th, and in the episode I just released this morning, I've sort of been working on that all week. I did a whole bunch of stuff that kind of pushed me in that direction. And so now I'm ready to start. I want to have a conversation about spirituality, and I want to do a lot of content discussing it. And I'd love to actually do this with other people who are interested in doing it. And so I'm an engineer by trade. I think about things very analytically, very logically. For good because that's how I've trained my mind to work, or that's how the world kind of formed me through all of my connected experiences, birth to now. This is a large reason why spirituality was never available to me most of my life. I found when I considered it, I found myself to be kind of incompatible with it. Like there was these sort of magical aspects to it that just didn't fit with who I am and how I think. And then I got older and wiser, and I had a bunch of really wonderful experiences that opened the door to it. And so because of that engineering background, I think sort of first principles, and if I want to have a conversation with somebody about a topic, I feel like we have to build a framework for common understanding. So if we're going to discuss things of this nature, I have to describe how I think about them. And I didn't get mine. I mean, I basically, as I think through spirituality, I think it's just such a deeply unique thing for everyone. I think I'm going to describe in today's episode how I think about these things, but it's very deeply unique to me. And as I've mentioned in the past, as I've began studying spirituality, God, and taking it seriously, and I've developed like a profound respect for all of the paths that exist to this. And so when I talk about these things, I'm not saying you should find your way to this the way I did. I'm just offering up example. I'm offering up I'm trying to give you who have perhaps already found this a path of understanding how I think about it, so that we can find areas to where our beliefs overlap and kind of fit them together. And I think that will greatly improve both our understanding of what it is and how it works. So I just think that's very important context. Before I start having any conversations about something like this, I think it's very critical that I point out my way is not the way. It was the way for me. So, as somebody talks to me, I'm going to talk through exactly like start to finish how I got here, how my belief system works. And I think it will be very accessible to people with like a computer science background who were atheists their whole life, who are very logical and analytical in their thinking, often certain they're right about everything. um, some of what I have to say, if you haven't worked around computer science or you haven't been a software developer or DevOps or, like if you haven't had that background, some of this will sound kind of foreign, and that's okay. I have to construct how I think about everything using my experience, and that's been my experience. But I feel like it's what's cool about thinking through things in a computer science lens is computer science is really good at, as a software engineer, you have to do these abstractions. You have to be able to look at a system with wild complexity, potentially that somebody else built. And you have to begin like picking big sections of it and just labeling them. This is the thing that does X, and this is the thing that does Y. And together they do Z. This is really useful for thinking about something so big as the universe. So let's back up a second. I feel like the first place you start in any conversation is like definition of terms so that we can lay a foundation for common understanding. So that was all important context for that. So how would I define spirituality? It's my framework for understanding everything. When I listen to the like academia and the physicists and all that talk about theories of everything, I think their theories of everything have a part in this, but I don't think they explain like my cognitive function. I don't think they explain, a physicist or a mathematician's theory of everything explains the like the granularity of the rules engine that runs kind of this universe that I exist in. The thing that every atom has to agree to about inertia, gravity, all of these things. So it's really important, but I feel like it only describes a small piece of what this all is. And it's a hugely complicated, incredible piece that I have a lot of respect for, but I find it doesn't address some of the most important questions, like why am I here? Who made me? What is this? Like the really big stuff. Now, when I think about spirituality, for me, as this super analytical, I got somebody driving outside, very logical, kind of immune to magical thought most of my life. When I think about spirituality, it's the thing that completes me. It's the thing that before I had a framework for understanding the universe that was fully cohesive and coherent in my mind and critically compatible with my entire life experiences leading up to that moment of sort of completeness. It lets me feel complete. It lets me feel whole. So as I define spirituality, up until about age 42, like I mentioned in the last podcast, I had this just big hole in my understanding of what I am, what all this is, what it's for, that left me feeling that it was very difficult to find purpose. It was very difficult to feel joy like I do now, just sustained all the time, because there was that big hole in my knowledge, my understanding, the fabric of what I am as how I define me. I was purposeless. I was just like, this was all just a basket of random die rolls that I'll never be able to wrap my mind around. And I should judge all the people that say they wrapped their mind around it because they claim to have something I don't have, and I call bullshit. Kind of arrogantly, I think I did that most of my life. And what now that I can, so I can do a apples and oranges comparison to two mind states. I went my whole life in one mind state, and then it's like I just grew enough in the richness of my understanding to where I could fit it all together into a thing that let me complete the story in a way that really resonates to the core of me, where it's not all, now that's critical. I don't think spirituality can be a lie. You can't lie to yourself about it. You have to really believe you found an answer to what everything is, what you're for, how all of this works, in order for you to be quote unquote saved or with God, to find Jesus, you know, like we've all heard. I don't think so. I was always very honest with myself about that. It's like I built up a framework for understanding what I thought spirituality was, and this view of it is still very compatible with that. But I just thought that all of the stories I'd heard for that, I was incompatible with them. And so I was therefore lying to myself if I accepted them. So they were never available to me. That is powerful. I mean, it means going from 0 to 1 on spirituality means you have to answer everything honestly in a way that fills that gap in yourself. And so that's spirituality for me. That was me coming up with a coherent, logical understanding for the magic of all of this. And I'm going to talk through it start to finish in the rest of this. But first I had to answer we have to, in order to have a conversation about it, we have to come to the same place in just our definition of terms. Like, what is it? Why is it important? Because now that I've lived in both states, one is superior. One is incomplete and sort of aimless and leaves you in a place where you can't have joy and harmony and thought. And you're left in this constant state where you're you see things happening around you and you're kind of mad at people for why they're happening. And once I had spirituality, I understood the cause and effect of everything. Like at once, all of a sudden, when I look at something terrible somebody's doing, I see their childhood, their likely life experiences that steered them in that direction, and I forgive them for it immediately. You know, like the beautiful thing about when you can understand the cause and effect of everything, and you are in control of your own perception. That is huge. So the bridge for me to understand perception mechanics, that's how I think about it. Everything's an engineering thing for me. So perception mechanics is another term I use for It's basically, to sum it up, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? Can you perceive both at the same time and then select one for intentionally, because you realize that you have the ability to make that, like, we all have the ability to make with we have free will to choose how to view the glass. And we can do that with everything. Everything is a glass, either half empty or half full. And a perception mechanic, a philosopher, somebody who is, if you looked at my Hitchhiker's Guide episode, the Jedi, sees everything that's happening around them in this way, where they can see a positive view of everything that's happening and always select for it. I can do that with everything. And that's so powerful. It means I never have to accept a bad mood. I never have to waste any of my time trying to assign blame to somebody for bad outcomes that are occurring in front of me or something tragic that happens in my life. I can always translate everything somebody does or that happens into a glass that I can, with my will, I can shift it to 50-50 and then select for the half full view. That's perception mechanics. That's some Jedi shit. And it takes a lot of careful practice and study. And for me, the gateway to understanding it was philosophy. It was Roman Stoicism. It was that book I mentioned, A Guide to the Good Life. It was me listening carefully to much wiser people than me who had found this. And they built a bridge and they built all these tools that are so compatible with my deeply analytical. What I find in philosophy is the same thing as religion. But there's no metaphor or meme. So in my last episode, I talked a lot about how one of the reasons religion feels so silly or is unavailable to so many people is because we used story to capture it and record it and propagate it throughout our history. So it's all wrapped around sort of like campfire stories, because a lot of times it was probably families sitting around a campfire, grandparents telling the stories to their grandchildren. And so in a 21st century human, they sound kind of silly. And when you don't understand that somebody much wiser, running in full Jedi mode, and by that I just mean harmony of thought, where you can, a perception mechanic who can look at everything through that lens, where you can choose how to process something internally from the most in the most beneficial way possible. You can choose to interpret everything, and you run in this state of automatic forgiveness of everyone. You're immune to anger, fear, shame, embarrassment. It's one of the reasons I can get on here and just pour my soul in front of the world, because I'm not embarrassed of who I am. And when I make mistakes, fine. Tomorrow I'll fix it. I rarely make I rarely repeat mistakes. I think of them as hugely necessary for who I am and who I'll be tomorrow. So, as I started podcasting, because it's just awesome, I love this this whole medium, and I started sharing it with family. And in my early stuff, I'm very cautious. And then I reach the state where I'm just totally divorced of embarrassment and I find privacy useless and I overshare. And I'm good proud of when I tear up because I'm just feeling like this deep well of gratitude and joy. I'm not embarrassed about it. I'm trying to teach you all to have this. It's no longer something to be embarrassed about. I'm proud of it. Good proud, not bad proud. I do a whole talk about that in some of my earlier work. There is such a good thing. There's such a thing of good proud and bad proud. And this overshare is good proud. And so let's talk about so now let's move to the next level. So how did I get to a granular understanding of the universe that was compatible with all my computer science background and 20 years working in the software business and when I speak of quote unquote simulation theory and some people find that so off-putting to think of, we're all living in the Matrix, but I don't think about it in this weird kind of what do you have? Don't you? It's so frustrating when you can't think of the right word. I don't think about it in a negative sense, like the 1984, the movie would be described as a such a bummer when I can't find the right word I want. Anyways, I think you get what I'm getting at. I don't look at it through this negative lens where I view it as there's some potentially bad actor who's trying to harvest me for electricity or something like from the Matrix. I just think I am, therefore there is an engine there, something has to be computing this. And for me to sit and create abstractions that are compatible with my background, it allows me to unlock this inner peace and satisfaction. So it's by definition a good thing I couldn't be doing with my time. It's not like sacrilege, or it's not science fiction. It's me answering the most important questions that give me fulfillment and sustain joy whenever I want them, to sit and think about the architecture of this universe I'm writing in and how I am architected. So let's talk about that now. Through just a year of filling my mind with, I became hungry for knowledge, and I just spent thousands of hours listening to the greatest minds of our time talk on YouTube, because they're all there. If you know how to push out all the bullshit that exists and go find these incredible minds. Lex Friedman's a great gateway to it. He just is focused on that community. So if you look at his guests and start following them on Twitter and who they talk to and what's on their mind, it gives you this wonderful gateway to skipping past all the bullshit and getting to the real good stuff. You don't have to go to Harvard. You don't have to go to Yale. You don't have to do all of these people will give you TLDRs that are very accessible and then point you at, if you want to dig into the granular understanding of anything, it's all there. So I spent a ton of time on philosophy, on some physics, and on standard model, quantum physics, field theory, and only minimal. That stuff is so foreign to how I think. So I'm very, very novice. But I'm just trying to get the broad strokes. I'm trying to get somebody to say, who understands the mathematics, to say, see this proof? It means this. And we all have checked the math. That's what I do when I study that stuff. And I don't want to understand it any further, because then I would lose the ability to do this abstraction thing that I do. I also studied spirituality deeply. Like, I started listening and looking through some of our oldest, most revered texts, and not being all know-it-all and dismissive, being deeply humble and respectful of what I found there. And then I tried to merge it and harmonize it with what I was seeing in academia and biological science. I've done a ton on, like, Mike Levin's work, Andrew Huberman, and then I've also done a ton of work on, like, cognitive science, and that's, you know, like, modern psychiatry, psychology, and, like, Donald Hoffman's work. There is no space-time is doomed, he says in every podcast, and I agree with it. I think space-time is just an agreement we all have in this shared state that's rendering us. So I looked at all this stuff, and I tried to have humble, deep respect for all of it, and then I tried to fit it together in my mind in a way that it all rhymed. It all was dancing to the same beat. And I developed a daily ritual of going out and walking next to some water for 4 miles and speaking aloud my thought, teaching myself to do this, to just be able to jam for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on complicated stuff and have a logical beginning, middle, and end that connects all of it. That journaling is so powerful. It allows you to structure all of your thought in your mind and compress really complicated ideas to where they all are cohesive. And so that's how I started building all of this and building in myself a spirituality that is kind of computer science, computer geek, you know? I mean, it's not like what I grew up hearing in church, but it's left me with the same outcome at the end. So I think the Christians, the Muslims, the Buddhists, Hindus, they all have to respect that I found my own path to that state of fulfillment. And if we can both agree on that definition of spirituality and fulfillment and wholeness as just wholeness, you are incomplete. You didn't have an understanding for what the universe is, what you are, that's granular and logical. And when you accept it, it's not a lie. It just makes sense. Then you have to respect my path. You have to respect that mine's different. And it came from being an atheist my whole life, deeply analytical, logical in my thought. Honestly, very arrogant about what you had and dismissive. But you have to forgive me that. It was all necessary for me to get here, where if I do this right, I can build a bridge for all the other people that are stuck where we were before finding this. I think what's cool about my path is you might get the creator of Religulous, Bill Maher, somebody like that could listen to something like this start to finish and go, well, I don't know, because he doesn't have the computer science. But what I'm trying to do is create something that is compatible with 21st century atheist, agnostic man, to give them this wholeness, this completeness in their heart that all of the most learned in each of the faiths have gotten for themselves and have tried to communicate by rigid adherence to the teachings of their schools, the path that was found to this. My path is deeply influenced by that, but it merges a lot of this other stuff that I think might be accessible to an audience that needs it. We desperately need this in these times before us. And we need a manual that's much more simple and kind of dumbed down for this massive state of disharmony that we've all been in for so long, where we're all kind of arrogantly sure we're right, that these things are unknowable. So when I think about all of this, I imagine it running in like super Azure Cloud or AWS. I imagine us, so I extend sort of exponential age thinking to this place 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, where we manage to be wise enough not to murder each other off with all of the ways we've developed to do that now. And we survive it. And we teach AGI like parents. It's not hard-coded. There's never going to be 3 rules. We have to be good parents. We have to model good behaviors. And when I modeled an outcome in my mind and I do a forecast, a projection of likely outcomes, I can see us building a rendering engine that can model out something like this. And I start thinking really carefully about how I'd architect that. So when I go back even further in time, beyond the Bible and the Quran, and I go to like, I find like hermetics from ancient Egypt, and then I think through the lens of like Graham Hancock and his cataclysm theory, and I look at all of these artifacts strewn around the world that have these common, we cannot explain the engineering of a lot of what you'll find in Giza Plateau and other places around the world. We cannot explain, even with modern engineering, how you would do some of what's left there in granite. And so then when I look at the teachings that come from that, and I listen to hermetics through the same lens where I'm taking it seriously, I'm not being dismissive, and they're describing all of human state being, all of existence is mind, and there being sort of this the all as defined, and that's just kind of like a collection of all the cognitive agents that have ever been and ever that are and ever will be existing in sort of like a real, like, you know, this is enough. This is enough. This is heavy enough. So I'm going to stop here. I got to go be a dad, and I need to go about my day, but this is a good further foundation. In my next capture, I think I'm going to do a real granular like architecture of that is theory of everything that explains how all of us exist as cognitive agents within this shared state. And a lot of the technical on how I think it's all stitched together and how it works. Or I won't. I don't know. Like that might be sort of sacred knowledge that I don't want to, like, maybe that's a thing I wrestle with. So that's a thing I see like the physicists doing. Like Eric Weinstein and his geometric unity is worried about how his life's work could be twisted to negative outcomes that maybe he can't even forecast for humanity as a result of all of his effort that was meant for good. much like E equals MC squared, and eventually translated to the atom bomb, and how his community has to own a certain amount of responsibility for the power, that powerful destructive force that is sort of, we all know it's kind of there. We have mutually assured destruction lying in wait at any moment. And just a few deeply imperfect humans that don't have a real good understanding of even how it works are allowed to hold their finger above a button that can do that. And so there's sort of a responsibility to all of this when you unlock some sort of nobody creates anything. It's just they assemble all of the bits of information in a cohesive way that can there is no original thought. This is something we're all doing together, and it's all layered on a bunch of thought that happened before us. So I don't I'm okay with, like, I think a thing I might just do is stop here and say, I think in doing all of these things I've described, I've come up with a very granular understanding of some stuff that could be twisted to negative outcomes. And so I feel like there's a responsibility there that that information shouldn't necessarily just be blasted out without making sure you've taken precautions to prepare all the minds properly for using it. And so I think this is a good place to stop. I think, like, right there, I think you have, if you talk to me about spirituality, a good handle on how I do it, how I understand it. And as I go, I hope, with people who want to join me in this, through all of the old teachings that are available, and try and make sense of them in a humble, respectful way. Now you have a way to harmonize your views with mine, and how the lens I view all this through. This is fun too. I mean, allowing yourself to accept, to allow yourself to indulge in the idea that you are cognitively complex enough to build an abstraction to understand all of this in a way that's has integrity and aligns well with what this all actually is. It's beautiful. I think it's what we're here to do. Like, I really think that's what this is for. We're supposed to do this. We just have to be careful about how we do it. And we have to be deeply respectful that everybody has a unique view of this stuff that is vital to compose with. Like, you don't get a complete picture of all this without composing with everybody's view of it. And our paths to finding this completeness in us is, each of them are uniquely our own. Some of us think very similarly, so we can, go read the Bible, the Quran. I don't know what the Buddhist books are called. The Hindu books, all of these things, or my crazy computer sciencey one. And they'll just fit, and you'll make them your own in real subtle ways. But you're wise to be very humble and respectful of everybody's unique path. And a lot of our wars in the past all of the holy wars that they were just arguments over semantics in one school of thought, religious thought, or they were, all of this was people, I think, in taking the mandate they were given to protect their instruction manual and view it as sacred. I think they misinterpreted or that directive as meaning they should go smash all the other books that other people use to get to that end result. And that's where all of that dysfunction comes from. What I'd like to do is build like a harmonizing frequency for all of these schools and these unique paths to finding spiritual completeness, where we just go, we all have something valuable to contribute to that effort. And we have to be really humble and respectful of each unique path. So the proper approach is to revere all of these manuals, including my awkward computer geek one. Thank you all so much for listening to me. Anybody who'd like to talk about these things, I'd love to have you on my show. All right. Cheers, everybody.
It's coming around, you're feeling cut down and in the ground, and so we all come together. We making a sound, we sing. Look at all this love we found.